Appreciate being here today. I'm honored to be here to talk to you guys because you guys do something that I have no desire, interest in doing. And that is you guys are in the medical field. You guys are in our healthcare profession. And I'm the last person you want giving healthcare to you. My father-in-law is a fire chief. My brother-in-law works for the Fayetteville Fire Department. And those guys they get juiced and jazzed when that little toner goes off in church. They're up and out the door or wherever, and they go to help people. They're the ones that rush in to help others, and I am not the guy you want doing that. So I have a lot of respect for people that will dedicate their lives to helping their fellow citizens. And if you guys are proud of what you do and how you help your citizens in your country, in your field, would you say aye?
Aye.
Very good. That is awesome. Well, I have nothing to offer you on healthcare today, as Tracy said. By the way, my wife and I were reading through the schedule of events Thursday night. I grabbed her and I was telling her what was happening yesterday and today and who was speaking and the topics. And about 2/3 way through it hit me. I said, Tina, I'm going to be the dumbest person they hear all weekend. You've been hearing PhD level information all weekend, and now you're going to get to hear a guy show his mastery of the 5th grade skills of English. So that's what you're in for today. But you know what? You and I have been taught something all our lives, and that is knowledge is
power.
Power. Knowledge is power. And I'll tell you, knowledge has its place. Knowledge is a great tool. But all of you think for just a minute, haven't you known someone that has all the potential in the world and just can't seem to get it together? Haven't you met someone, perhaps in a clinic or a hospital that you worked in, that was so intelligent and so far beyond even your intellectual thinking, but they just couldn't make anything out of it? Knowledge is a great toolbox. And if I'm going to build a house and I've got a box of tools and I've got my materials here, but I never take the tools out, can I build that house? So guys, knowledge may not be power, even though it's a great tool. Action of that knowledge is power. And today I'm going to unpack 6 things for you that I believe will help you in your personal life and in your work life. But I'm the kind of guy that likes to hook things together and associate things together. I'm a very visual person. So I'm going to unpack these things for you as I tell you about my first season coaching high school sports. And I've got to start with the year 2008. Because in 2008, I ran a construction business. I had my own business. And I had been going back to college for 6 years part-time trying to become a coach. And I had dreamed about becoming a coach. And in 2008, the housing bubble burst. And all of a sudden, overnight, me and a lot of my friends were out of work. All of us lost our businesses, and some of my friends even lost their homes. It was a tough time. And I worked with some very intelligent people, but we did not see this coming. All of a sudden, the water got turned off on us. And I was a year from graduating, and so Tina and I dug in, and I finished up that year. I even did janitorial work at night and cleaned school buildings just to get us through that year. It was a tough year. And when I graduated in May of 2009, there were 42 of us that graduated in my class from the University of Arkansas together. There were 2 openings in Northwest Arkansas. One at Rogers High School, one at Gentry. I'm from Farmington. My wife's from Farmington. Our kids go to Farmington schools. I had volunteered there for years. And I just knew that's where I'd end up coaching. But they had no openings. And I talked to the athletic director, and he said, I don't see any openings here for several years. I had to have a job. So I interviewed, and I got offered the position at Gentry. Well, my wife teaches in the school system at Farmington, and our daughter was young at the time and went to school there. And my 2 sons, one was a 7th grader and one was a junior. And I thought, well, they'll drive back and forth with me to Gentry every day, and I'll get to coach them, and it'll all work out. And then me and my wife sat down and began to talk about it because she had some reservations. And guys, she lined them out. She said, here's number 1, here's what what I'm worried about, number one. And then she said number two. And as she went down the list, my heart began to sink. And I realized that I was going to have to go and coach and influence someone else's children and leave my boys at Farmington and let someone else take care of them. And that tore me up. For 3 weeks, guys, I was nauseous. I was sick inside. I would wake up at 2 in the morning hoping it was a nightmare, and it wasn't. But it was now June. We're 4 weeks away from starting football. I couldn't back out on Gentry. It would put them in a bad place, and I needed to work anyway. And so one day I was sitting around lamenting this to my family, and I'm just tore up about it. And my wife and my boys, we're all sitting in the living room. My wife says, "You're coaching baseball, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, I'm assistant football. I'm the head wrestling coach." And guys, I've never seen wrestling in my life. That was a position open. And I'm assistant baseball. And she said, "Well, when you coach senior high baseball, don't y'all wear the uniforms like the players?" And I said, "Yeah, we do." And she said, "Well, when you coach wrestling, do you wear the same uniform?" And they just hee-hawed, just like you guys did. And they had a good time with that joke at my expense. And I appreciate it. My family was so supportive. But it was just tearing me up because I was going to have to coach against my own sons. And here's a picture of me and my oldest son, Tanner, before the Gentry Farmington game, his senior year.
Oh, no.
And we beat them 13-12, and here's a picture afterward. And he's just crying and boo-hooing. And I've got tears in my eyes. And all I could say to him is hold him and say, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." What kind of teasing did he take? I mean, what kind of stuff did his friends say to him in that situation? And I thought, you know what? If I'm going to coach at Gentry, I'm going to pour all this knowledge and this desire that I have to influence young men, and I'm going to get Gentry to the high school playoffs in football because they hadn't been there in 16 years. In the state of Arkansas, there's 8 teams per conference. They take 4 to the playoffs. Some years you get a wild card and they take 5. Guys, surely you can trip in 16 years and fall into the playoffs. But they hadn't done it. And I thought, well, if I'm going to have to do this, if life has dealt me this hand, if this is what I'm going to have to do because I went for my dream, if this is what's going to happen, then I'm going to get these guys to the state playoffs. And I pushed, and I prodded, and their level of expectation was here, and I knew it had to be here. I'd seen it done right. I knew it had to be here, and so I was pushing them, and I got hauled in the coach's office twice that year and told I needed to calm down, and I'm thinking, calm down? You guys haven't been in playoffs in 16 years. You need to bring it up, brother. Week 10, thank you, darling. Week 10 rolled around, and we were right where we needed to be. We're going to go to Huntsville and take on Huntsville. The winner goes to the state playoffs. The loser stays home. Our kids, our players are walking around going, "We got this. We can beat Huntsville. We can beat Huntsville, Coach." Our coaches were walking around going, "We can do this. We got this." And I was terrified. Because I knew what it took. I had been there before. And I knew that a cornered dog is going to fight their hardest. And I knew Huntsville was going to give us a game we hadn't seen on film yet. And I told the coaches about it, and they just blew me off. And we went to Huntsville that Friday night, and you can guess what happened. We got beat. I was not happy. I had convinced myself that if I'm going to be in this situation, I'm going to get us in the state playoffs, even though I'm an assistant coach, but I'm going to do what I can to drive us there, and it didn't happen. There's 5 coaches on staff for football. 2 of them coach football only, so they took the next week off for vacation to rest and recover and recuperate. The other 2 coaches coach baseball and softball, so they took a week off to rest, recover, and recuperate. Didn't I mention a while ago I'm the head wrestling coach? Wrestling starts Monday morning. I am not happy. And besides that, we joked about wrestling in the football office. We called it the hugging team because they're always hugging up, right? And so I walk in there Monday to practice, wrestling practice, and I've got 30 young men excited and ready to go. Half of them, that's all they do is wrestle. The other half came out of football. They're ready to get that bad loss out of their mouth from Friday night, so they're all fired up to wrestle. And they gather around me at 3 o'clock, and they said, Coach, what would you like for us to do? And I gave them this sage, wise advice, and I said, I don't know. Now, the problem with that, guys, is I wasn't saying I don't know that I'm ignorant because I was. I was saying I don't know because of my attitude was so bad. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. I had some seniors that were so excited to get started. They blew right past my flippant comment, and they said, Coach, we've got some drills we like to run. And I said, well, y'all line up and run. And that's the way the 2010 Gentry wrestling season got started. Well, I had a gentleman named Kip Rankin, that's a businessman, and he had come from Oklahoma. And in Oklahoma, they start them out wrestling when they're like T-Boss age. And he had coached his son all the way through the youth leagues, and even though he wasn't an accredited coach with the state of Arkansas, he knew a lot more about wrestling than I did, so he volunteered to help me. And so for the next 2 weeks, we started getting our team ready, Coach Rankin and I, and that's what happened. Because our first tournament was the week of Thanksgiving on a Tuesday. It was a junior high tournament all day in Jay, Oklahoma. My wife works at the school at Farmington. My sons and my daughter go to school at Farmington. They got the whole week off. Guess what I'm doing all week long? Driving to Gentry every day to coach wrestling, and then I've got to drag these junior high kids to Jay, Oklahoma to wrestle. Coach Rankin's son is in senior high. He doesn't have to go, so they've got plans with family in Oklahoma, so they don't go. So I'm going by myself, having never coached wrestling in my life with a bunch of junior high kids. Guys, can I tell you, I was not happy. We go to Jay, Oklahoma. We wrestled all day long against all those Oklahoma schools, and we won a whopping 3 matches. 2 were to the same kid. I should send that kid a Christmas card every year. Praise the Lord, he came, or we wouldn't have won 2. We might have won 1. But in wrestling, if you get thrown to your back, you're in a bad place. And it's tough to wrestle from a bad position and get out of it. And I saw my kids get thrown to their back all day long in the first 30 seconds. And I saw the frustration on their faces, and I saw the fear in their little eyes. And I felt ashamed. What kind of man brings children into a brutal sport like wrestling and doesn't have them ready? What kind of man puts his own needs and desires and wants ahead of children's? I did not like who I saw in the mirror, and I knew I had to change. Have you guys ever got into a position in life? Have you ever taken a job or taken on coaching maybe your kid's team or taken on some committee at school and you got into it and it wasn't what you thought it was? Can you say aye? Aye. Right. That's where I was. But I knew something had to change. I don't even remember the rest of the Thanksgiving. I don't remember what happened. But I walked into that school Monday, no smarter than I was the previous week. But I had enthusiasm and excitement, and I rah-rahed those kids, and I cheered them on, and that whole gymnasium filled, and those kids could see there was a difference, and you could feel it in the air. So the first thing I want to unpack for you and tell you today is you've got to own your own life. See, BJ up here is a nice young lady. But if I blame BJ for things not going right for me, who have I given my power to? Who can change it for me? BJ can. I've given my power to change the situation away. And I had been blaming everybody. I had been blaming life. I had been blaming the school system. I had been blaming everything on my situation. But I had to own my own life. You've got to take responsibility because you're going to be in a situation where it's not good. You're going to get, I love it when you get I don't understand, I'm in corporate America, but you get a boss change sometimes, and guess who gets 0 input in the decision? And you report to them. But sometimes that happens. But as long as you blame other things and other people, you give your power to change away. Well, the Tuesday night after the week of Thanksgiving was our first senior high match. It was against Bentonville. Now here's a really important part you guys need to understand. Gentry is a 4A school. Bentonville is a 7A school. I don't know what the school board was thinking years ago when they decided Gentry needed wrestling. But there's not a 2A school, a 3A school, a 4A school, a 5A school, or a 6A school within 200 miles of Gentry that wrestles. Guess what's all around us? Fort Smith, Southside, Northside, Van Buren, Rogers, Springdale, Fayetteville, get you some of that. So guess who we get to wrestle? And then we get to go to Missouri across the border and wrestle those schools where they've been wrestling since the kids were 4. And then we get to go to Oklahoma and wrestle some of those guys. Now let me tell you about Oklahoma wrestling. We go to Southsaw later in the year. The new gym is here and there's a basketball game going on. The old gym's right beside it and it's wrestling homecoming. The old gym was packed. Standing room only. Before we took the floor to wrestle, they called men out of the bleachers that had made All-State as Salisaw wrestlers. They started in the 1950s, guys, and they lined them up down the court. And to make matters worse, they had wrestling cheerleaders. I've never seen wrestling cheerleaders in my life. That's the kind of competition we face. So we're at Bentonville, and Coach Rankin and I are doing our best, and we're trying to wrestle this 7A school, and there's this old man up in the bleachers, and he is screaming for Gentry. And he's got cowboy boots on, and he is stomping on the bleachers. And this dude, every match, he moves up a bleacher. And I'm telling you, I thought he was going to end up on the match with us before it was over. And I asked Coach Rankin at one point, I said, who is that old dude up there? And he looked up there and he goes, I don't know. I thought, it's got to be someone's grandfather. We go Thursday night to Rogers to wrestle. The old dude is up there again. But this time, he has learned some of my kids' names, and he's calling them over to the bleachers in between matches and talking to them. Now, guys, I don't like that. You don't mess with my athletes. In fact, one of my seniors I noticed was over talking to him named Seth. And Seth came up to me in between matches, and he goes, Coach, you need to go talk to that guy. He knows what he's doing. Swallow that one. I knew Seth was right, and I knew that I needed to go talk to this guy. Number one, I don't want people messing with my kids, and number two, if he could help me, I really could use the help. That's right. Well, I went and talked to this guy, and his name is Darrell Knight. And Darrell Knight retired as an L.A. County, that's right, California, sheriff's deputy. His daughter had moved to the area, so he and his wife moved all the way to Arkansas, bought a little farm outside of Gentry, and he would come to all the sporting events to be a part of the community and have something to do. But here's the best part. Darrell Knight, all those years he was out in California busting bad guys, he was a volunteer wrestling coach at Canyon High School in California. Guys, there's hundreds of moves in wrestling, and Coach Knight knew them all. He not only knew the moves, he knew the minutiae detail. Where to place the hand, how much to twist, how much pressure to put. He knew it all. The technical stuff Coach Rankin and I didn't know, he knew. So I invited him to come to practice. And he was real cautious. He came to 3 practices in a row. He was real polite. Even though he knew a lot more than I did, he was real cautious about stepping on my toes and getting into my authority. And he knew what he did. He handled the kids well. The kids seemed to like him. And after 3 days, I thought, I got to do something with this guy. So he, Coach Rankin, and myself went into the coach's office after practice one day, and we began to talk. And as we talked about our values. And I realized there were 3 core values that we had in common. And the first one was no shortcuts. You cannot take shortcuts. You've got to do things right. And the second one was we got to do a few things really, really well. There's hundreds of moves. My kids have only been wrestling a few years. Some of them are first-year kids. We couldn't teach them all that stuff. So we chose 3 moves. Believe that. We chose 3. that we were going to master. And then the third thing is how we were going to treat each other. And we were going to do it with love. We were going to discipline you, and we were going to be on you, and we were going to call you out when you did things incorrectly. But we were going to do it from a position of love and respect and trying to make you better. So the second thing I'll tell you is it's important that you surround yourself with people that believe what you believe. Guys, sometimes your schedules are just tough. I already heard someone here today talking about years ago when they were working a certain shift and how it was. I know it's tough. You get regulations and policies and procedures passed on you, and do they ask for your input? And you've got to deal with that. And I'm telling you, if you don't have a support system around you, if you don't have some people you can align yourself with that are there for the right reasons and doing things right, it's going to mash you. And you're going to turn into something that you don't want to be. So you've got to surround yourself with people that believe what you believe. With Coach Knight on board, we started getting really good. We would go to these tournaments, these 12-team tournaments, and instead of placing 11th or 12th, we started placing 9th and 10th. We started beating Van Buren every time. We started beating Springdale every time. We were getting excited. And one day, after a tournament, Coach Rankin and I are standing out by the bus. And we're waiting on the kids to load the bus. And Coach Randy Steen came walking out and come up to us. Now, Coach Steen was retired from the military. He coached in the Missouri educational system and retired from there. Then he came across the border to Arkansas and is coaching at Rogers Heritage High School. And he wasn't a good old Arkansas boy, so none of the coaches liked him. But to make matters worse, his team was really, really good. In wrestling, you could score 70 team points between the teams. And most matches were close. It was like 40 to 30, 38, 32. They were close matches, but not Heritages. They would beat you 60 to 10, 65 to 5. And once in a while, they'd get you 70 to 9. So nobody liked Coach Steen. Well, Coach Steen came walking right up to me and he shook my hand and he said, "Coach, I want to tell you something. I've been watching your team this year. You guys are the most improved team I've seen. If there's anything I can do to help you, please let me know." And he walked up. My chest swelled up. I grew a little bit of hair. I'm feeling pretty good. And I feel this. It's Coach Rankin. "What? What do you want, dude?" He goes, "Coach, do you understand what just happened?" Now listen, I've been married 25 years. And my wife asks me sometimes if I understood what happened. And that usually means I missed something. So I said, "Coach, no, what happened?" He said, Coach Steen doesn't help anybody. We have to take advantage of this." And I knew he was right. Well, I didn't like the way our practices were going. We had too much standing around. I wanted everyone working. If you're going to spend 2 hours, let's burn 2 hours, right? And so I went to one of Heritage practices. Coach Steen let me come, and I walked in, and here's what I saw. He had 60 kids on his squad. He had them all on the mat at the same time, and he had them all paired up. And he would walk around with his whistle, and he would give a command. He would say, "Run the half," and he'd hit his whistle, and there'd be 3 seconds of ferocious activity, and then the kids would pop back up. And he'd say again, and he'd hit his whistle, and there'd be 3 seconds of ferocious activity, and the kids would pop up. And he'd walk around and go again and hit his whistle, and again and hit his whistle. And he would just drill them like they do in the military. I was like, wow. And I went back to practice, and I instituted that in our practices, and we got much, much better. So the third thing that I'm going to tell you today is you need to use mentors. Mentors are people that's been there ahead of you. They've been there, they've done that. They can teach you the things to avoid, the things that got them in trouble, that tripped them up. And they can also speed you up in your career and in your learning and teach you the things to do. And without Coach Steen helping me, it might have been years before I picked up that style of practice. But instead, I picked it up instantly. we got a lot better. In fact, right before Christmas, we finished third in a tournament. We won a trophy, the first trophy Jiffy Wrestling has ever won. We were excited. Well, Christmas break's coming up, and I've got these two managers. Here they are, Faith and Cheyenne. Now, let me tell you, these girls are goofing around here, but I was so proud of them. They did such a good job. They mopped the mats. They cleaned up after us. They were really on it. They did a great job. I thought maybe they were out there because they're boy crazy, but no, they were serious. They were trying to help the wrestling team. And so they would do anything that they could. And one of the things that they did during our matches is they kept statistics. There's a wrestling statistic book, and they'd write stats down as we're going through matches. And they'd come up to me after every match or tournament, and they'd hold these books out, and they'd be so proud of the job they'd done. They'd go, "Here's the books, Coach." And I'd just take them, and I'd pat them on the head and thank them, and they'd run away giggling, just proud as they could be. And I'd take that book, and I'd toss it on my desk. I've never coached wrestling. I did not understand wrestling statistics. But I heard a man one time say, the numbers tell a story. And so I thought, you know what? I've got to get into these books. If there is something in there that can help us, I'd be a fool to not uncover it. And so during Christmas break, I sat down to go through these books, but I didn't know what to look for. So I did what any American did. I Googled wrestling statistics. Well, sure enough, there's things to look for. However, it still didn't mean anything to me. I had no point of reference, right? So I did something that you're going to have to do, you're going to face at some point in your life and career. And that is, I trusted myself. I said, I'm going to look at these numbers and see what they tell me. And I did. And I went through those books, and let me tell you, when I got done, I found a stat that was going to change our season. I was so excited. It's like holding a pile of gold in my hands. I was so excited. And here's what I found out. In wrestling, it consists of 3 2-minute periods. And you wrestle for 2 minutes, the official blows his whistle, stops play, and he repositions you. There's no 1-minute break. They reposition you and go again. And 6 minutes doesn't sound like a lot. But you've got to be in some kind of shape to wrestle for 6 minutes. Because you're always pushing and pulling. You're always tense. And you're not like that in any other sport. There's times you can relax, but you can't in wrestling or you'll get pinned. But here's what I found. If we were involved in a match that ended in the first round, which meant our guy got pinned or their guy got pinned, someone got pinned in the first period, we won a measly, pathetic 30% of the time. If we were involved in a match that ended in the second period, which meant our guy got pinned or their guy got pinned in the second period, we did a little better, 34%. But if we were involved in a match that got to the third period, or if no one gets pinned, you get points in the matches as the match goes, and they award who's got the most points, the winner, after 3 rounds. If we got to the third round or past it, we won 83% of those matches. Guess where I want the match to end, guys? Third period. Two big problems we got to overcome. Number one is all philosophy in wrestling from Maine to Hawaii says you get your opponent down and you pin him as fast as possible. Why? Because even a great wrestler can wrestle himself into a bad position. So you don't want the match going on. So we had to overcome that. And we explained it to our kids. We explained the stat to our kids, and they understood it. But then they would get in matches after that, and they would lose their mind. And even if they won in the first or second period, we weren't happy. We're like, no, you got to get to the third. You've got to get to the third. And they'd be all disappointed. All right, coach. And so we worked on that. The second thing is, like I said a while ago, you have to stay engaged with your opponent. You can't just run around the ring and avoid your opponent. They'll disqualify you and award your opponent the victory. You've got to wrestle. So we had to change our style and wrestle defensively. But we had to get in really, really good shape to wear people out. Have anybody ever heard of CrossFit? When 2007, my firefighter brother-in-law, firefighters are weird. They got a lot of time on their hands. And they got involved in doing goofy stuff. And someone discovered CrossFit, and they had been doing CrossFit, and he told me about it. He said, you got to try this. It'll just kill you. I said, well, that sounds great to me. We tried. Oddly enough, I was stronger around 4 and 5 than I was in 1 and 2. I've never experienced that in my life. It was something about the way CrossFit was done, and I thought, that's what we need. And so after practice, I'd bring up a bunch of equipment from the field house, and we'd do CrossFit in the gym for 20 minutes. See, we're drilling these kids like Coach Steen taught us. Now we're doing CrossFit on top of it. We are wearing them out. Parents were telling me our 16, 17-year-old and 18-year-old sons that ought to be driving up down the road chasing women at night are coming in after wrestling practice, eating supper, doing homework, and they're in bed by 7. We were wearing them out. So the next thing I want to tell you is you've got to think outside the box. Winning in the third period is something that no one was doing. It's not anything anyone was focused on. They were focused on other things. But we knew for our little school with our new wrestlers, we had to do something different. And once we found that step, we hung on to it. We believed in it. We knew it was the right thing to do, even though the rest of the world was telling us that's not how you do it. We thought this is the way we got to go. And you're going to face that in your life at times. You're going to know there's a different path. And the other people in the room are going to be trying to tell you all the things wrong with that path. But you've got to trust yourself to push forward and know that that path's right. The way that you do your work today is different than what they did in 2010 and what they did in 2000. The policies and procedures change, and you can have an impact on that change by thinking outside the box. Well, we got really good, and now we're in the home stretch, and the state tournament's coming up. Well, our last tournament was 2 weeks before the state tournament. We wanted to give the kids 2 weeks to recover and recuperate before state. Well, it was up in Missouri, where they've been wrestling forever, right? But I have educational credit hours that I have to have every year. And on that Saturday, I had to go to Prairie Grove and sit in the cafeteria with a bunch of other teachers and coaches and listen to this kind of stuff like y'all are doing today, all day about education. And I had no choice. The state of Arkansas makes you give them a kidney if you miss. It's a serious deal. So I went and did that, and Coach Rankin and Coach Knight took the kids up to Missouri, and Faith and Cheyenne sitting there texting me dutifully what everybody's doing. They're like, Barney's up, and Barney won his match and pinned his guy. They're like, Stephen Tow's up next. Stephen Tow got beat. And then about 10:30, they texted me and they said, Seth is up. And then they texted me a few seconds later and said, Seth is hurt. I'm like, what? What? And they texted me again and they said, Coach, he's on the mat screaming, and Coach Knight and Coach Rankin are out there with him. Then they texted me again and they said the Missouri trainer is on the mat with him. And then they texted me again and they said the ambulance is on its way. Seth was the senior that said, Coach, we got some drills we can run. Seth loved wrestling. He's the first wrestling-only athlete that I met at Gentry. In fact, he would bring the new guys in, and after practice, I'd have to kick him off the mat because he was always having some seventh grader twist him into a pretzel, and somewhere under that pile, he would holler, no, you got to push harder. He loved it. He wanted other people to like it too. The previous week, the bracket that came out for the state tournament, and Coach Knight and Coach Rankin and myself had sat down, and even though we hadn't wrestled any of those other teams we were going to have to wrestle in Little Rock, we tried to figure out how to win a state championship. And we knew we had to have 3 individual championship winners, and Seth was one of them we counted on. But Seth, as a senior, who loved that sport, had dislocated his knee. If he would have tore a ligament, he might have been ready in 2 weeks. If he would have tore a cartilage, he might could have wrestled in 2 weeks. If he would have broken a bone, he might could have wrestled in 2 weeks. But dislocating a kneecap is one of the structurally most devastating things you can do to a knee. There's no chance he's ready in 2 weeks. Well, I got a bunch of negative texts from wrestlers that night. The negativity continued through Sunday. And I got to school Monday, and there was just a black cloud over the whole school. By 3 o'clock, I knew what I had to do with this team. And I talked it over with Coach Knight and Coach Rankin, and they agreed, because we knew that we might lose them, but if we succeeded, we'd galvanize them. And so I got them in the corner, and we forego whatever we were going to do to warm up. And I got in their face, and I told them exactly how it was. I laid out the situation exactly for them. I cheated on them for feeling sorry for themselves, and I explained to them that Seth played a huge role in our team, and that now we couldn't replace him. None of them could replace him. But we were all going to have to get a hold and pull up on that rope a little bit. If we asked you to place in the top 6 in state, you now had to place in the top 5. If we thought you could make the top 4, you had to somehow find your way to climb into that 3rd spot. Everyone had to pull on the rope. And we went to state. And that's exactly what happened. I'm telling you, when we got done talking to those kids, we could have went that night and beat anybody in the state. Over the next 2 weeks, I've never seen a group of people more focused on getting their job done. They responded to the challenge. So the 5th thing I'm going to tell you is you've got to find triumph in tragedy. You know, I'm no expert on the Bible, but the good book tells us it rains on the just and the unjust. We're all going to get some rain in our lives. And it's not what happens to you in life. It's what you do about it. Sometimes they're gonna have to cut your position because they don't have enough money in the budget. Someday that person that put a ring on your finger and said, "I do," is going to say, "I don't care anymore." We all face challenge and tragedy, but you've got to look at defeat and pull victory out of it somehow. Well, we go to state, and the state tournament starts about 1 o'clock on Friday. It goes until about 10 o'clock Friday night. You come back Saturday morning at 8, and you wrestle until about 6 on Saturday night. Now, in football and basketball, you can do all that in about 3 hours. But it takes us 2 days. And so we got there on Friday, and we wrestled all evening Friday evening. And we got done about 9, and we loaded up, headed to the hotel, and the 7A schools were still wrestling. And when I got back to the hotel, a good friend of mine from Harbor called me and said, "Coach, have you seen the standings?" And I said, "No." Truth is, I didn't want to see them. I didn't want to know. I wanted to keep our kids focused. He said, "Coach, you guys are in first place." Well, I wasn't happy. I didn't want to know that. I wanted to keep the foot on the gas, right? But his wrestlers had all texted my kids, and they were all except by the time I opened my hotel door, they were all right there going, Remember back when we faced Huntsville? We're here. No. So I had to get their minds right again, and we had to start again Saturday morning. Well, we wrestled all day Saturday, and the big board, they had it on the big board at UALR Coliseum. There's 6 wrestling mats out there. There's all this activity going on at once, and we stayed in first place all day. About 4 o'clock, they shut the big board down, and we had about 2 more hours of wrestling. Well, Coach Knight, Coach Rankin, and I got together and collaborated, and we looked at it, and we said, well, we think if we do this, and if we do this, and if we do this, we'll make it. We got a plan together. And so we took off, and we kept wrestling. And at 6 o'clock, we were done. And we did what we thought we had to do, but we couldn't pay attention to all the other activity. We didn't know how everybody else had done it. And so at 7 o'clock, they gathered us around. They had the results total. And they got us together. And they said, in 3rd place in the 4A and 5A state championship, Little Rock Christian Warriors. And they said in 2nd place in the 2010 4A and 5A state championship, the BB Badgers. And they said your state champions for 2010 in 4A and 5A are the Gentry Pioneers. My kids are going nuts. The 7A schools are over here to our right. They're going crazy. We're like their little brother that we've been beating on each other all year. They were so excited for us. My wife has a hook in my right bicep. She is jumping up and down and screaming in my ear. And with all this going on, one thought crossed my mind, guys. Is this all there is? And I felt ashamed for thinking that. That really bothered me. And I thought about that over the next days and weeks and months as I went on to coach baseball. And finally, after pondering this a long time and thinking about it, I realized the key. And the sixth thing I'll tell you is the journey is the reward. See, you and I say someday when I get out of college, someday when I get a job here, someday when I make this pay grade, someday when I get to that hospital, someday when I become a supervisor, someday when I get this accreditation, and we someday our lives away. Today is April 1st, 2017. Let me ask you something. How many April 1st, 2017s do you and I get? One. Every day is a gift to be opened and unwrapped and unboxed as the day goes on. You look at where we came from. A guy that didn't know anything about wrestling, that wasn't happy to be there, that was frustrated with how life had turned out on his dream, and to own my own life, to own my circumstances, and then to bring Coach Knight on board, who knew the stuff that we didn't know, how to find a guy like that, and then to get Coach Steen to help mentor us and speed our program up. And then to have the guts to think outside the box and do something no one else had done before. And then to deal with Sean, our best wrestler, going down. And to win that state championship. The journey. It's all about the journey, the things we want, all those nuggets of gold and those diamonds right there in the dirt. I hope this has been good for you. I hope you'll think about this when you get sideways and get down and think about these things and how you can take these 5 or 6 items and apply them to your situation to make it better. And I'm going to leave you with this. June 24th, 2014, right, Mama? We get up at 4 a.m. We are excited because my first grandchild is going to be born that day. And we drive from Farmington, Arkansas, all the way across 412 through Mountain Home to get to Jonesboro, where my son and his wife attend Arkansas State. And our granddaughter's supposed to be born about 9 a.m., so we're trying to get there by 9, and we get there right at 9 o'clock. The hospital's in different buildings. We go in the wrong building. We go in the wrong entrance. We get to the wrong place. We finally had to go around, move the car, go to another building, and we walk in, and we walk off the elevator, and we see the sign, labor and delivery to the right, and we turn and we go down labor and delivery, waiting room. And we walk in the waiting room. We're so excited, and I see my son's father-in-law with the grandmother-in-law and the mother-in-law in the corner, crying their eyes out. And all the father-in-law can manage to say is point down the hall and say, "You need to see Tanner, my son." And we walk down that hallway toward that room, and we passed some other family members that were slumped against the wall crying. And we wanted to stop and ask what, but we had to go on. And we opened the door, and there's my son and my daughter-in-law holding each other and crying. Something had went wrong, and my granddaughter had went without oxygen for 15 minutes. Guys, I'm a positive person. I'll tell you what. You tell me to go fishing, I'll get in a rowboat and go after Moby Dick with the tartar sauce. But I was having a hard time wrapping my brain around 15 minutes without oxygen. Scared to death. She needed to go to Children's. We're in Jonesboro. The helicopter come, and somebody like you walked down that hallway in a jumpsuit that said Air Angel, in a wheelchair, put my granddaughter through. What a relief it was to see somebody like you taking care of her. And they load her on the helicopter, and we get in the car, and my daughter-in-law has to stay in Jonesboro because she's had a C-section. She can't leave for 3 days, so my son gets in the car with my wife and I, and we head down the interstate, and my wife says, "Can you go faster?" And so I went 100. I don't like speeding. I despise paying tickets. She said, "Can you go faster?" So I went 115. And a few minutes later, she said, "Can you go faster?" And I did. We didn't see a single police officer all the way to the hospital. But we got out of the car, and we walked in that hospital, and somebody like you greeted us. And my son quickly explained the situation, and somebody like you took him to my granddaughter. And somebody like you knew we were hurting. And we got a huge family, and took all of us into the waiting room and set us down and told us what they could. And somebody like you came in later and asked us what kind of food we liked, what kind of things we can do, and they gave us a map of the hospital and explained where everything was, and they got us some food. And somebody like you came in later to see if we had sleeping arrangements in hotels and things like that, and if we needed anything. And somebody like you kept coming in and updating us through that. There is a procedure for brain injuries from oxygen deprivation that was pioneered and started at that hospital in Little Rock. It became active in 2007. But my granddaughter had to lay there for 3 days, for 72 hours, and take this procedure. And they couldn't touch her, they couldn't disturb her, they couldn't scan her. We had no idea what was going on for 72 hours. And when they got done after 72 hours, and the staff was awesome. I'm telling you, that culture in that hospital is unbelievable. Somebody like you scanned her brain. And the neurologist sat down with us and put that on the board. And sobbing explained to us that scan that someone like you took, that the only damage she sustained was right back here and about the size of your fingertip. They could not believe how well she did. And I'm telling you today that she is a happy, energetic, awesome, fully functioning, speaking, running around, almost 3-year-old big sister.